Welcome back to Just Giants with Grump and the Cranky Fan, the best damn podcast for the best damn football team. I'm your host, the Football Grump, and with me as always is Mike the Cranky Fan.
The best damn football team.
Well, you know.
Well,
You weren't completely floored by the performance of Mike Glennon?
floored is a word. Let's just say it was a rough Sunday for me, Grump. I went to 2 basketball games. I saw the Knicks get blown out. Went to Brooklyn, saw the Gators lose. I did my customary, watch on my phone for about 20 minutes of the Giant game before I said, why am I wasting my time? Click. So that was another loss. Good weekend.
I wish I had done that.
New York City FC won the MLS. That was the highlight of the weekend, Grump. We were at Hammerstein Ballroom, and it was a blast. I can only imagine what it's like being like in Europe if you're like a Barcelona fan and like a million people are in a town square going off. We were like 3,000 people. It was a lot of fun. So that salvaged a very, very bad weekend, highlighted, of course, by our New York Football Giants.
Yeah, I went to an ISPW wrestling match out of a church gymnasium over the weekend, which is a win for everybody, really. And then I saw the Giants on Sunday. That was my weekend.
I'm thinking like the movie Hoosiers, where they play like in these high school gyms and stuff, or little barns, and like people just show up. And what kind of wrestling is that? Is it like midget wrestling or
no? So first of all, I made that same joke while I was there, but it actually was a very large church gymnasium. Like it was like, I don't know, it was very, very extremely big building, but it's pro wrestlers, like a mix of like guys on the downhill age-wise and I guess popularity-wise, and guys on the upswing.
So guys like from 1984, it was like Jimmy Superfly Snuka and King Tonga on the card.
Yeah, it's guys like that. Yeah, so there was oh man, I can't remember his names. And we're reaching into like my childhood too, so I don't remember. But yeah,
sounds fantastic.
It actually was really fun when you think about it in that setting of like a church gymnasium. It's kind of ridiculous. Anyway, there was a football game in a really nice stadium over the weekend, and that's what we're supposed to be talking about. And it was Bad News Bears all over again. 37-21 is a kind way of saying the score. It was really 37-7.
And it was one great play to even give it 7, really.
Yeah, I think so, but also that's kind of also how the Chargers secondary is. So I mean, that was like, it was a great play, but also I mean that was kind of how you drew that up. They leave kind of big gaps in there and broken tackle, and you're off to the races there.
I guess the theme for our show, and we'll get into it after you do your game recap, is how this game was game planned and executed from a coaching standpoint, because that's kind of really our big story of this, our big takeaway from this game. I mean, why don't you give us a quick game recap, because you were, paying more attention than I was, because I'm kind of zoned out right now.
I don't blame you. So you nailed it, right? This game, the big takeaway is on coaching. What else can you take away from a game like this? I mean, you've got maybe your number 2 corner is out, so you've also got your number 3 corner out and your number 4 corner out, so you've got your number 5 playing the number 2 role. So right there already, you're evaluating a young guy you drafted completely where you don't want to have to play him. You've got another dude I don't want to make excuses for, but also was just positive for COVID. He's his first game back, potentially lingering side effects, which we saw with, admittedly a bigger kind of player with Will Hernandez last year, but you've got that going on with Logan Ryan as well. It's not an ideal situation, not the least of which is you have a backup quarterback in. So, the only thing you really can evaluate is the young guys you've got forced into bigger roles than they should be in, evaluating what you've got, and you've got to evaluate the coaching decisions. I mean, just game planning, in-game decisions, things like that.
Game preparation. I mean, is this team ready to play on a week-by-week basis? Do we see things getting tightened up? And I don't mean necessarily you know, game plan's getting better every week, but does this team look like it's ready to play as we're getting into more adverse conditions? I mean, this team knows their season's over. They know it's getting more and more banged up. How does this coaching staff get 47 professionals to be mentally and physically prepared to play each week? And these are the things we have to – this is what we can look for, the things we can glean for off-season analysis. I mean, not just two dopey podcast hosts, but – the front office, whoever be making those decisions in the GM chair, and then ultimately the owners.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really the big spot. That's really where we're starting the evaluation here. I mean, we've got to take a step back and look at everything because things are going to change this year. I mean, we know it. You can guarantee that some things are changing in a big way this offseason. So we've got to take a step back and look at everything. But, on the minute level here, This team didn't look ready in a lot of ways. Defensively, I thought they started off okay, but there was just a genuine lack of pressure being put on Herbert. I mean, it really looked like 7-on-7 practice for Herbert. I mean, a little bit of running around. They got a sack here or there, but for the most part, just able to throw at will. They started off okay. I mean, but for the most part, they just hit the bad matchups at the wrong times. The Chargers seemed to know what was going on. The disguise just wasn't good enough.
Before we even talk about coaching mismatches, let me just throw the question out there to you. Do you think this roster, the guys that are playing now, do you think they've quit on this coach yet? Do you think it's something as simple as that, or is it just a hodgepodge of just bad coaching decisions and poor execution and lack of talent? But or is it something as simple as they're going through the motions, they've kind of quit on this season and inherently quit on this coaching staff?
I think there's isolated incidents of that, and I think it's a little bit more general. I don't think it's like quit as in like forget this. I'm over this, whatever, I'm not trying. It's more like they're not 110% in it. I'm not going to go after that ball. I'm not diving for that. I'm missing this day of practice. My ankle, it hurts. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not practicing with this ankle. Whereas, in you've got guys like in 2011, Ahmad Bradshaw is playing on 2 hurt feet. You know what I mean? That's what I mean. I think that's where that is probably happening, and I think that's isolated. I think there are some guys doing that. I don't think it's everyone. I don't think it's systemic either.
Yeah, and I'm also we have no idea.
No, this is just a guess.
Your guess, do you think those isolated instances are more of a F this season or F this coach and coaching staff? What do you think?
I think there's probably some of both.
Because F this season, it happens. That's kind of human nature, I think.
Yeah, I mean, also some of that is personal, right? I mean, like you look at, and I'm literally just throwing a name out there. I don't think this is the case with him at all. But you look at someone like Sterling Shepard. Tough year for him, injury-wise. I mean, he came out on fire. He looked real good, and just little nagging things week after week with him. If he were to just say F this season, it may not even be as broad as a team viewpoint for him. It may just be his just having a tough year. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be a big deal, but F this coach is definitely a bigger deal.
Right, exactly. And I think that's one of the things that, when a new GM comes in and makes his evaluations of this coaching staff, that has to be accounted for. Is this team fighting for you in spite of, a bad record, a bad situation, the stink around this team right now? Because, we can get into this now, I guess, talking about, a lot of people have the opinion that you need to clean complete house, and it's not good to have a GM and a head coach, on different cycles, I guess. And I disagree with that. I don't think, I think that if a new GM is coming in with a vision, I think it's doing your due diligence to see what you have in this organization. And that means evaluating the entire roster and evaluating the coaching staff. It does not mean I'm just going to start fresh and just dump everybody and just dump the coaches. But I think that's part of that evaluation period with the new coaches. Are they fighting for you? Are they fighting and dying for you, even though the season's over? And I don't know. I mean, when you see lethargicness for weeks and weeks now, part of that tells me that they're not only done with the season, but I think how much is that kind of seeping into I'm tuning these guys out, the hell with them, and it'll leak out soon enough. I think the stories of what's going on in that locker room, but that's my real concern right now is that I think he might be starting to lose this locker room.
I think there is some instances. I think it's a little bit more of some of the guys that were brought in with him, whether it be this year or last year, brought in with him or brought him because of him and what he was building last year, may feel like this guy is, selling magic beans. You know what I'm saying? I think that's the sentiment towards F this coach that I feel, and which is weird because to me, what I'm most concerned about is his in-game stuff. I think his off-the-field stuff, at least from what I can see. Like I said, none of this is, we have like 1% of the picture. When we were talking about this stuff, we have no idea what interactions are like behind closed doors with these guys, whatever. But I'll say this: it certainly doesn't look like, and I don't know. This isn't even an extreme example. I think we see this like once every 2-3 years, but I don't think that this situation is even approaching the situation that is going on in Jacksonville, right?
Oh, that's night and day. I mean, that was something.
But what I'm saying is that there's a Jacksonville situation every 2-3 years. And I don't think that we're approaching that. I don't think that is like, aside from the being left in Ohio thing, I think a Vegas situation with John Gruden is a lot more uncommon.
Oh, well, I think a lot of that, I think the Gruden thing is, are you talking about what got him fired or just kind of his demeanor towards his team? I mean, the email stuff, I'm not saying those emails, that type of situation is rare, but how it kind of comes to light and results in a guy getting fired pretty quickly, that's pretty rare.
Well, I mean, just in general, as a common trend among the NFL and its coaches, I don't think it's a common thing. We don't see that often. Coaches getting fired for, off the field public affairs versus getting fired for being horrendous coaches. You know what I mean?
Not X's and O's, wins and losses, specific reasons to get fired. Things that are kind of above and beyond, above the normal 9 to 5, 40-hour week part of his job.
But I mean, down in Jacksonville, you've got a coach who's lost his entire locker room and his entire coaching staff, I think, at this point. That is, that is absolute nightmare scenario. Where we're at is, it's bad. You know what I mean? This whole season's been bad. And I'm not going to make excuses, but this is a reversible scenario. Now, we're talking about, because I don't want to deviate from the bigger point here, because it seems like the GM position is going to be open this year. It seems like it's going to be a retirement thing. I wish I could say more than that because it's been weeks where we've been saying that, but I can't say that more is going to happen. We have to assume that Dave Gettleman is gone. But how do we assume that Joe Judge will be back? Well, I mean, we can't really. However, we have some quotes from the press conference after this game. And I think that they're really revealing as to Joe Judge's future. So I'll hit you with this, and I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, and before you say it, I mean, you can tell by little subtle things like body language in a press conference. And, everybody knows who follows me on Twitter or even on this show knows I don't really pay attention much to coach speak. I don't really care what guys say in press conferences 98% of the time. But sometimes you can glean something out of what's been said between the actual lines. So with that in mind, let's listen to the statement, and I can give you my thoughts. It's the holiday season, folks. I'm going to eat a candy cane while we're doing this. So.
All right, so here's the quote from Joe Judge from the very, very part of a very long answer.
Okay.
When I took this job, I made it very, very clear I was only going to do this if we were all committed to doing this the right way. That's been something that's been very clear from ownership on down. I'm very happy with the support ownership gives. Okay, so that's very revealing, I think, of Joe Judge's...
Two parts that's very revealing to me.
Okay, go ahead. Let's hear it.
One is the right way equivalent to my way.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know what in his mind he means when he says that. If he says we're only going to do things if it's done the right way, it's what he thinks is the right way, which is my way, that could be a problem. That to me is a little bit of a warning sign. It goes in with the second part of that about the front office is fully behind me.
Mm-hmm.
That tells me that they're on board with him.
Yeah, I mean, it has to, right?
Yeah, I mean, if he was to say, again, reading between the lines, what people don't say is usually more telling than what they actually say. If he didn't say anything about this, about having support from the ownership or from Dave Gettleman. Notice he didn't say Dave Gettleman from the GM, the front office. He said ownership. So that to me tells me front office don't care what Gettleman says. I know he's gone. I mean, things by the time we know about it have already been thought about for weeks in advance, and it happens in business, it happens in sports. So him not saying that, Dave is behind me tells me he's gone. Front office probably had those conversations already with them, and it's like, you will be back. We consider you, we are building around you, Joe Judge, and whatever happens with the general manager or president of football operations, they have to work with you. So he feels a little more empowered to say things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said, and I have a question about making it go a little bit further. And
Sure.
That's the opening part of that statement. When I took this job, I made it very, very clear. So to me, that... Now, just to flash back a little bit to Joe Judge's interview, Matt Rule and his people called the New York Giants, told them the offer that the Carolina Panthers gave him, and inquired if they were willing to match so he could come in for his interview. And this was after the Joe Judge interview, where apparently he knocked their socks off. They told him not to bother. So this was apparently a very convincing interview, enough to not even want to bring Matt Rule in to talk.
It's really interesting, Grump, because the way he phrases it, it's like they were knocked. Not only was the ownership socks knocked off, their socks were knocked off because this guy was demanding what he wanted. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like almost like they're under his spell. Like, this guy's great. We better do exactly what he wants, which is amazing for a guy with no real background as a head coach, no real track record.
Well, not only that, but it makes me wonder if there's some level of guarantee here.
You mean like in his contract, or
just in his contract? I mean, he sounds rock solid sure.
Well, coaches are. I mean, we saw the Urban Meyer presser yesterday. That looks like a guy that's not rock solid sure he'll be back next year.
That's the guy who looks like he's rock solid sure if he has anywhere to go tomorrow.
Like, I think we should go to the JIA tomorrow and wait for the departing flights and see if he's on any of them. That's what it looks like with them.
Exactly.
But, these guys are all of these guys, coaches, players, they're the most confident people on the planet. You have to be. You have to have that level of arrogance, that level of security to rise, to be competitive, to beat out the best of the best, to achieve the level of success you are. For a guy like Joe Judge, there's only 32 head coaches in the NFL. You have to be a confident, arrogant prick to get to that point. So, yeah, he thinks that he's, again, things the right way, my way. It's working. I need time to implement this. Coaches don't have the same time frame as general managers or ownership, where it's like, or fans or media, where the turnaround has to happen yesterday. Hot seat talk after 25 games. That's not the way these guys look at it. They say, I have a process. This process will take X amount of years, X amount of draft cycles, X amount of free agency things, X amount of coaches, blah, 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 blah. So he thinks he's right on schedule, probably. Maybe not looking at it from wins and losses. He probably has his own metrics of this is where I need to be to get this team turned around and going. So, yeah, why would he think otherwise?
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. I feel like the confidence is backed up by something. Maybe not a guarantee, but maybe weekly assurances that we've got your back. You'll be back next year. I know what you're doing. We discussed this. I have no idea. It feels like there's some level of something behind it.
I think it's probably that he's had a conversation with Mara in the relative recent, I'm going to say,
right.
Completely guessing, this week, that, hey, this is bad. You know how frustrated I am. I kicked a garbage can after a game. All this, there's going to be change in the front office, blah, 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 blah. We like what you're doing, like your philosophy, like your headspace. We like you. You will be around. And that, you're right, that probably has emboldened him a little bit. I don't think it's a financial thing because contracts are contracts. I mean, if they fire Urban Meyer tomorrow, he gets paid the rest of his contract.
Right.
So, I think this is more of a word among men that he'll be back, which I don't necessarily agree with. I'm not sure how you feel of a...
Agree that it... Okay, yeah. Agree with the idea of bringing him back?
Not the idea of bringing him back. The idea of I'm guaranteeing you're coming back, regardless of what happens. That's where I have a problem. Because to me, again, I said a little while ago, I have no problem bringing in a GM and keeping the coach, but they have to be able to work together. And that GM is in charge. He makes the call. And if he feels that this is a coach that cannot execute based on the roster that this GM will give him, he has the right to move on. So if a guarantee was coming in and we have to fit a round GM into a square coach hole, that's a problem. That's a very bad analogy. But
yeah, it was an FCC violation.
Yeesh. But you're starting off on the wrong foot immediately.
No, so I agree with you, and here's where I'm going to jump in here. I don't necessarily disagree with retaining Joe Judge. We'll get into in-game decisions from this game, by the way, because we're talking about him, and that's important. But I don't necessarily disagree with that, and I agree with you, right? You've got to be able to get a general manager that shares your coach's philosophy if you're going to keep him. In general, this is what you need. A general manager and a head coach that are on the same philosophical page and can work together as men. You know what I mean? Just personalities meshing. Very important. But you're right. I mean, if you want to bring in a GM who's going to work with the coach, they're going to work together. But ultimately, the GM has to be in charge and able to let the coach go if that is needed, because that is how the hierarchy works. You can't have a co-system, but they should be working together on 95% of what their jobs are.
Agreed.
So, it's a tricky situation. But I will say this. I think it's easier to pick one of the two. I think it's way harder to be hiring both at the same time. I know everyone has this philosophy of firing everyone and cleaning house and then starting over. And I get that. But what are the odds that you're going to hit on a GM and a coach in the same year that are looking for positions, that want to join your terrible organization and have a shared philosophy, be able to work together? I mean, really, think about that. Isn't it easier to have one that you trust and believe in the philosophy, kind of a little bit? Maybe he needs a better roster, you bring in a GM, or vice versa.
Let's be in a little reality for next year. This team is probably not going to be very good next year, right? I mean, this is not a playoff team next year where, so having kind of knowing that, I think that's where you keep Joe Judge for next year, but like on an evaluation period. You know what I mean? Yeah. You're not wasting a year of a playoff window next year. I guess that's my point.
Yeah,
So
I think also part of that not guaranteeing anything for him. I mean, if for no good reason at all, Bill Belichick is fired and looking for a job, I mean, I'm sorry, Joe Judge. You know what I mean? Nothing is on the table for you.
Of course, I mean, like, like Tim Tebow after he throws a touchdown in the playoffs to R.I.P. to Demaryius Thomas. He thought he was going to be the starting quarterback of Denver next year, and all of a sudden, Peyton Manning becomes available. Well, I'm sorry, but all bets are off because Peyton Manning's available. Jameis Winston probably would have been back in Tampa Bay for another year, but Tom Brady decides that he wants to go to Tampa next year. Goodbye, Jameis.
Yeah.
I mean, situations do change, but you have to plan for the most likely course of action, not the what if something great happens.
Correct. Yeah. Now let's transition here to a little bit of that kind of philosophy, and I think it kind of sounds like Dave Gettleman when he joined. But let's see. So this is still Joe Judge from the presser, but a little later on. You've got to put all the You've got to put all the pieces in place over time. There are a lot of examples of teams that have come in and had quick success and then filtered out quickly. But there are better examples of teams that have collectively gone together and put the team together the right way over the course of a few seasons and had sustained success over time. So he's referencing that same right way that he referenced, earlier.
Okay, so let me ask you the question then. I know these are big caveats. The injuries, COVID last year. Do you feel that this organization, from however many games he's been the coach now, 28, 29 games, is being built the right way? And do you feel it is overall trending towards they're building something, or is it trending down into chaos and confusion?
I think that over the course of the last 4 years, there has been no consistent way that this team was being built. But in the last 2 years, I've seen kind of a direction. The last 2 years have felt like more successful execution of what the previous 2 years were supposed to be. Basically, it looked a lot more like Judge and Gettleman agreed on what the right pieces for that philosophy looked like than Shermer and Gettleman agreed. I'm not saying either is right or wrong. I'm saying that there was a difference of opinion in what those people looked like. So you got a mishmash of ideas. Also, Shermer had the short end of the stick of being first. So he was stuck with the cap-cutting roster, whereas Judge was not. And those first 2 seasons were bizarre. I mean, we decided to invest heavily in running backs and running the ball, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. But the attempt to rebuild the offensive line was done with a bunch of B-grade guys instead of going the opposite route of getting the A-grade offensive linemen and then getting the B-grade running backs. We decided to do the other thing. And
but those are Gettleman things. We can parse that out to say that was roster building, and that's not necessarily the building this the right way. I mean, so let me rephrase the question then. Do you think as part of building it the right way, he is actually building it? Does that make sense? Like, okay. Is he executing his plan of building something? And is it being executed well enough that he should be continuing to put that culture in that foundation and that infrastructure in place?
Well, no. I'm gonna say flat no. Because, okay. I mean, I think that, again, I think that the concentration on the offensive line, I hate to make it like that, but I'm going to make it like that. The concentration on the offensive line is getting back to that philosophy, and I think that there was a return to that philosophy and a real emphasis put on it last year in terms of building it the right way. There was, in terms of roster execution, with obtaining Andrew Thomas, Shane Lemieux, and Matt Parrott all in one draft, and then bringing in as much help as you can to the offensive line. Joe Judge spending weeks with the offensive line instead of, bouncing around because that's where it needed to be. In that sense of building it the right way, I think so. But where I'm going to say no is that over the last 2 years, I can't point to too many players and say that they got better. So you're not actually building anything.
Yeah,
not right way, not wrong way. You're literally not building, I think, at
exactly.
that point.
And also, after 2 years, I can't tell you what this team is. I can't tell you.
Well, I mean,
I can't tell you what their identity is at all. And I get it, there's injuries, but everybody has injuries. And
you literally fired a coach in the middle of the year. You're not going to have an identity from this year.
Exactly, and that's what I mean. It's like I don't know what we are, and after a year and a half, almost 2 years, to still say where are we? What are we trying to do? I don't think that. I don't know. I'm not saying this is a fire him on the spot thing, but it's definitely something in the negative category if I'm evaluating his building it the right way. It's like, what are we building? Like it's like when you walk by an empty lot and you see a sign saying coming soon, new office tower, and then 2 years later you drive by it again and that same sign is there and it's still weeds growing. It's like, all right, well, how do I know the office tower is being built?
Oh, are you talking about the American Dream? Which is ironically right next door.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
Well, look. I'm going to be completely fair here because I have to say I think, but I think it's a pretty educated guess here. I don't think that this is going way out on a limb, but it is. I think that the identity of this team is to be a run-heavy, run-first, and throw play action off of it team. Think a little bit like the Tennessee Titans. I think that's what Joe Judge and Dave Gettleman and the Maras agreed the direction of this team was going to be. Now, I think that Joe Judge is a hands-off CEO kind of guy. I think he lets his coaches coach. Now, if Jason Garrett's idea of that team is what he brought in, I believe Joe Judge just let him run his offense. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think that the direction was to build it a certain way, and Jason Garrett's version of that and Joe Judge's version of that don't exactly mesh.
So Jason Garrett kind of blows a lot of these theories out of the water then. So if Joe Judge in that statement before said, I made it clear when I agreed to this that it would be done the right way, one or two things happen with Jason Garrett which makes no sense from that statement. Either Jason Garrett was thrust upon him by ownership, which doesn't sound like the right way, which implies my way, or he hired a guy that does not run the basic principles of what he believes is his plan for success.
Well,
so either scenario kind of worries me a little bit about.
I think it's a little bit of a third scenario that's like a mix of both. I think from what I understand of the situation is that Jason Garrett was heavily suggested from ownership. I think also that vacancy happened after Joe Judge was. I think that's right. Joe Judge was head coach before Jason Garrett was fired officially. Whatever. The point is that what I understand is that Jason Garrett was heavily suggested by the Maras. Now again, if they agreed on this general principle of how they wanted to build an offense, then exactly what I'm saying. Just Jason Garrett's version of that is just outdated, isn't run well, doesn't take advantage of Daniel Jones. That's fine, but we all think that the Maras suggesting a coaching opportunity for your new head coach is overstepping, right?
I completely agree.
Yeah, and I think that Joe Judge was put in a scenario as a first-time head coach to oblige the team that just hired him.
But that flies in the face of
building it the right way.
Before I agreed to this,
Yeah.
before I demanded we do. That sounds like a guy who's like.
But what I'm saying is he might have agreed to it at that time because they sold him on the idea of Jason Garrett is a smash mouth first, whatever guy. This is what he believes in as well. Give him a shot, whatever. Joge brings him in. Garrett says the same fucking shit.
You could also do, you could spend one day watching film, talking to colleagues around the league, and no, that's not true.
That's also true. Yeah.
So I mean, just because they say it, I mean, I don't know. There's something that's just not jiving with me between that and Jason.
He may have also just bought a lemon. You know what I mean? He may have just been sold by the Maras and Garrett himself and bought a lemon.
Are you talking about hiring Garrett?
Yeah, Judge. It's just very possible that he was just sold a bill of goods that never came to fruition.
Sold that goods by Garrett?
Sure, and the Maras. I mean, just sold in the interview.
Well,
I've in the past hired people I shouldn't have.
Yeah,
I got sold.
I'm completely fine with that if Garrett sold him a bag bill of goods. But again, if it's the Maras strongly implying, again, there is no playbook, no plan for success that says I'm taking recommendations, not even from my GM, but from my owner, because owners are fans. There's very, very, very rare instances where a guy off the street, because he buys a team, thinks he has the expertise and the knowledge to run an organization or even make really informed decisions. And something is off there. So we can move on from this thing, but already red flags, my alert is going off on his statement and what actually happened.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. And just one more thing on Mara. I just don't really like John Mara in general. I think he's had a bad track record as owner since he's taken over in terms of just press. I mean, he's not really good with PR. He's had to endure multiple scandals. And I think and by scandals, I mean with the team, not personally. Just embarrassing things with, the Josh Brown thing, came out and spoke, and now he had to eat some crow. Eli Manning, Tom Coughlin, I mean, is a huge one. All sorts of bad news bears with him. But most annoying.
The team's been bad, too.
Yeah. But I just hate this shit where he throws a tantrum and kicks some garbage cans over after the game. Listen, man, I don't throw a tantrum after this game. I don't throw a tantrum after any game. I don't kick things over because we lose. I know he's got a ton invested in this team, but he's also making a pretty huge return whether they win or lose.
Yeah.
I don't want it. It just feels like false kind of acting.
You're right, and it almost feel like it's almost like when you see, he kicked over a can after. It sounds almost like a planted story.
Yeah, it does.
We have to see, like, when something like that happens when it first breaks, who's the first person who reported it? And go back and say, is this a ownership friendly, newspaper or reporter or whatever, or is it just, something else? Because that sounds like I'm one of the fans. I'm as frustrated as you are out there.
Yeah,
and
it's so annoying.
Yeah, it doesn't seem genuine. It doesn't seem like, it doesn't do anything. It's like, okay, you kicked over a can, so what?
Yeah, and those shots of him in the owner's box throwing chairs and shit.
Yeah,
I don't buy it.
That's all you got.
I just don't buy that this billionaire cares so much about his team losing by a field goal. You know what I mean? That he's gonna throw a tantrum and slam his own chair on the ground. Like,
but nothing happens after. Like, if he was that pissed, you'd see like a coach fired the next week or something. Doesn't happen.
Yeah, I don't know. It irks me, and it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. To be honest with you, he's just an owner, and his job really is to hire the right people and not fuck up. All he has to do is do that and just sit back. I don't care.
I care so little about owners.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Of any sport, because, like, if I buy a car, I'm not worrying about, like, what's the reaction of, Henry Ford or whatever, any of these guys. It's like, why does it matter so much in sports? Why does Jerry Jones get, a camera shot twice a quarter in a Monday night game? It's like, who cares?
Yeah.
It's so silly.
All right, so there are certain things I like about Joe Judge, but one thing I am not sold on whatsoever with him, and I am challenging people to point to some evidence somewhere where I should be, is in-game decision making. And this game had all kinds of it, and also game planning, I guess. Let's start with punting on the plus side of the field on the opening drive. I mean, fourth and two.
This is a broken record.
No. But this is a higher level of stupid. We've got Mike Glennon casually walking off the field after not gaining enough on third down. Then he's got the alert to get the troops together. They all turn around. They run back into half of a huddle. And then they don't really break the huddle. And then they all run off and the special teams come on. Okay, so now we're punting. We don't want to waste our timeouts, Joe Judge. Come on, first drive of the game. We're already going to call timeout? No, we're going to run our punt team out there and force a punt with 1 second left on the play clock. And no surprise it's a touchback.
Meanwhile, while the defense is just standing there like, whenever you guys are done with your fun and games,
yeah, really,
you can continue. You're not fooling anybody, and it's ridiculous. It's it's a couple of things. One, it just shows complete indecision. The really good
one's prepared.
Yeah, the really good coaches know what they're going to do in these scenarios. They have it all. They have all these things considered. In May, like, what am I going to do if this sort of thing happens? They have it tucked away. They have an army of assistants around them and coordinators and things to say, hey, this situation, we're doing this. If you just look optics. We're getting to the point now with this coaching staff and with Joe Judge where optics do matter. And that just looks like a team that just is not prepared and just chaos and disorganization. And that's not good. That's not winning you over from anybody.
Not at all. I mean, I'm going to skip over no, I'm not. No, you know what? I am. I'm going to skip over this for now, and I'm going to go right into what I want to say here. And it speaks to the identity of this team as well. We game plan here. We game plan, you would hope, to exploit weaknesses and use your own strengths against another team, right?
You would hope every coach in college, NFL, Pee Wee does that exact philosophy.
Right. And what confuses me is this is supposed to be a team that's going to, his own quote, Joe Judge, punch them in the nose or smash them in the mouth or whatever the hell it was. And that's for this game. I know he says that, from time to time, and as to the identity of this team in general, but he said that specifically for this game as well. And they don't really try to run the ball. I mean, they do a lot of this wacky garbage with handoff to pitch to guy on the jet sweep, pitch back to the quarterback to throw the screen back to the original guy. I don't know what that is. And more importantly, on 4th and 9, we're going to run a fake punt where you have Riley Dixon throwing a pass to Keon Crossan. Riley Dixon is probably quarterback 6 on this roster. Keon Crossan is probably wide receiver 50 on this roster. Why can't we just run a 4th and 9 play where we have the best players we have running the play?
Well, our best player's not getting targeted enough anyway in a normal situation, so that's part of the problem. I said this, I think, 4 weeks ago.
You did.
I said, enough of the trick plays, enough of trying to outsmart them. We're not. This is a very, very, very smart league. There are very, very smart coaches, especially since Doug Peterson's no longer a coach. You don't have to think that you can outsmart your competition. The only way you will win. And I feel sometimes with this team that they try to think, if I can trick them, not the difference between exploiting their weaknesses and just trying to surprise them. And we do not enough of the former, which was your preamble into this, and too much of the latter. Too much of the end around. Too much of the, I'm going to line up, no, I'm not going to line up. Too much of the, I'm going to fake it, or I'm going to have my puncher throw it. It's a lack of confidence in thinking what you can do will work, and it never works. It never works for this team. It never works for bad teams. It works for good teams because you are doing tricking off of things that are normally working. If something is not working, a trick play is never effective because you're not tricking anybody. That shit's not working in the first place. If you can run the ball down somebody's throat, that's when play action's better. Or if you are just being successful running your offense, that's where a trick play is more successful. Not in desperation. They never work that way. So
it might work in that one instance when you're desperate, but it
once
won't
a
work
year.
sustained. Yeah, I mean, if it becomes part of your offense, it's not going to be. I would rather they go into this game and be like, look, our advantage here, as weird as that sound, is going to be running the ball and just come up with 10 running plays and 10 passing plays to run off of that and just work on those every day in practice and just really get those plays to actually get the timing right between all 11 guys, because they can't do that yet. And I would rather lose in the most boring fashion that way than lose with punters throwing passes and 3 backwards passes before a forwards pass bullshit. That to me isn't even an offense. That's like
playing Sega football or Nintendo. Just like hit the A button and just every time and see if it works.
Exactly.
Play.
Yeah.
And also, I'll take a step further. Simplify the offense and get the ball in the hands of your best playmakers.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, you design the best plays to win that game,
right,
and just only run those. Just get them down right.
You spent a lot of money for Kenny Golladay. Target him. You spent the second overall pick in the draft on a guy who's relatively healthy right now. He's not 100% obviously, but he is well enough he can play. Run the ball with him. I think there's too much I think they're reading a little bit of their press clippings a little too much of like, well, it's a pretty loaded wide receiver room even though there's some injuries. Lots of weapons out there, and you got to spread it around a lot. No, your best guys. Force feed it if you have to.
I mean, I'm just saying, like, if your offense isn't working, figure out what you're best at and just run that. Trick plays is not what you're best at. No one's good at trick plays. Trick plays are just the element of surprise and the fact that you executed that play enough in practice to not have a timing error or a screw up. Trick plays are for Super Bowls. Trick plays are for this game is the only game that matters forever. You know what I mean? This moment right here. That's what a trick play is for. Not some week 6 game against a non-conference team because you can't block. You know what I mean? And it's not like, oh, Andrew Thomas is out, we can't block. It's like, oh, 4/5 of our offensive line is out. We will not block this year. At that point, you're creating a new identity for your offense. You're either going to run that offense with those guys or just figure something else out. I don't know. I can't stand that shit, and I don't know what's going to happen here, but I do know that this offseason is going to be very, very, very interesting. We're going to see a lot of moves going around. GM, coaches, there's going to be some movement here. So be sure. Yeah.
A lot of player movement too. This roster is going to look significantly different. And don't assume who you think will be on this roster next year because you're going to see a lot of surprises, a lot of big names. They're not going to be Giants next year.
Agreed. So be sure to follow us on Twitter. I am at football_Grump. He is at the Cranky Fan. And this show is at Just Giants Pod. Can be found on SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, and more. And of course, the show is available on YouTube as well. So be sure to like and subscribe that. And we will see you guys for our next game Friday morning. Go Giants.
Go Giants.